you shouldn't have so carelessly meandered your way about the forest, because now you're in Traptrix territory. They're back! Folks, I am the Ghost with Knife, and welcome back to more Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and welcome back to the Traptrix deck. It's been a while since I've played this deck, and if you remember, this was one of the first big deck lists that I made on my channel. I'm a really big fan of this deck, even if the art's kinda yikes. If you've never seen this deck, it is a bug and plant-based trap deck. It's all about trying to disrupt your opponent as much as possible using trap holes, which is a strategy that I really like. Our list from last time hasn't changed too much. I believe Effect Veiler is new. I think some of the trap assortment is also new. I've also added SP Little Knight because that's just a really good card. And we traded out the Baphomet sheep for Malevolent Sin, because a Book of Moon can be kind of nice. That's the main changes of the deck. Not too much different, so let's get right into those games with one of my favorite decks. Alright, getting into our first game with the Traptrix and our new Laundry Dragon Maid mate. We are playing first here, which is a great way to showcase what Traptrix can do. We're going to grab the whole Nightmare with Mermelio, because we have the Garden in hand. I'm going to go ahead and use Mermelio to link off into our core card, Traptrix. If you haven't seen Traptrix, this is the most important card in the deck. You link yourself into this, and this lets you just keep searching and extending, and it's a really powerful card. We're going to try to Parallel Exceed here. I'm going to go ahead and activate Parallel Exceed. Our opponent is going to Dimension Shifter, which is a bit of a weird card to play. I don't know why they didn't do it earlier, but whatever. Go right from Parallel Exceed into our next big monster for Traptrix, Pinguicula. My bad, it's not Rafflesia. This is also a pretty big card for the deck. It's a great way to extend. It searches a Traptrix monster out of your deck and activates the effect so Sarah can grab you a trap. We're going to use Arachnacampa, and then we're going to use the Garden to go ahead and summon another Mermelio, which has another trap hole, which gives us even more interaction on our opponent's turn. Arachnacampa, which special summons itself after we summon Pinguicula, and Mermelio. We're going to make our other big control piece, Rafflesia, which gives our Traptrix protection, as well as allows us to basically use a trap hole from our deck using her. So with that, we have one trap hole effect, two trap hole effect, three trap hole effects, and an Ash Blossom. And with Holtea, I can special summon basically any Traptrix monster I want to from my deck. And if I do get rid of their cards with a card effect, I can scoop it onto Pinguicula, which is a pretty powerful and rough board to get through. So our opponent is going to go ahead and start their turn. We're going to try to use Ohime. I'm going to immediately Gravedigger's Trap Hole that, because I hate Makanko and I do not want them having anything nice. Going to go ahead and just stop that. Make them take some damage, make it a little bit easier to get rid of them on the next turn, and our opponent just decides, nah, we can't win from this position. Which is kind of generally how Traptrix games go. You set up a pretty good board, you negate them once or twice, and they're like, alright, I'm out. Alright, going into our next game, we're going first again, which is kind of a recurring theme of victorious Traptrix game. If you can go first, you have a lot of control over what you can do. We're going to use Pudica to go try to grab the Garden. Our opponent's got a Maxi, which is pretty rough for us, so I kind of have to Ash Blossom this. I don't really have a choice. I do not want them drawing a bunch of cards, because we do special summon quite a bit with this deck. Enough to give them value out of Maxi. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Garden. From there, we're going to go ahead and link off Pudica. We can kind of fast forward from here, because we kind of just saw literally everything we're about to do in the last game. Exceed. And then from Exceed, they're actually going to be chaining Havness, which I'm not quite sure why they're doing this. I think they just want the mill to try to get their Teelerman stuff going, which it doesn't look like they hit anything important, which is pretty good for us, because I really don't want them to interrupt me. So I'm going to go ahead and set up Rafflesia, just because it's one of those powerful monsters we can set up. I'm going to go ahead and use the Traptrix Garden to summon a Mantis, which is going to add the Arachnacampa to our hand, and allow us to extend into Pinguicula. This also allows me to set a Gravedigger's Trap Hole, which is important because we're playing some sort of graveyard deck, because that's what tier limits do. They like to mill, and they want to activate stuff from the graveyard, so we can use Gravedigger's Trap Hole to just shut down their nonsense. Gonna grab Pinguicula, and in this position, I feel pretty confident in my board. We have Graveyard Interaction, we have another Trap Hole with this, and we have a way to negate and stop their special summons, and if we can do that with the whole Nightmare, we can suck stuff up into Pinguicula. It's pretty good into the tier matchup. Tier is still a pretty hard matchup for us, because they're just really good in the grind game, and it's Horus tier. And from here, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I've seen enough nonsense out of this Horus deck. I hate this deck. this deck is really, really rough with the Traptrix deck that they can't set up. So from here, we're going to use Pudica. We're going to banish the Happiness. It's only going to be for 1 turn, but we're doing this basically so they have no access to fusions, because I want to make sure my opponent can't do anything. So on my turn, I can try to win on the crackback. And it doesn't matter. We banish their monster, we stop their search, and my opponent's like, yeah, nah. As their username says, you win. Like, our opponent is going to be going first into this game. It's going to be a little bit longer than the first 2 games we had, and also going to get to showcase what Traptrix can do coming from behind. But our opponent is going to basically just give us our turn. I don't know why they did that. I'm assuming they wanted to go first because they have a strong go first deck, and they just didn't get anything good. I'm going to open with Pudica, and they're going to immediately play Infinite Impermanence, which sadly is not a trap hole, so we do not get immunity from it, which is one of the cool things about Traptrix, is they're immune to hold effects, which only this deck is really doing, but whatever. So from there, we're going to use Pudica to go ahead and link off into Sarah, which is not great. It is something we can do. Parallel Exceed is going to give us a little bit more. My opponent is going to Max C, and I'm just like, no. Eat defeat, stupid roach. There's only one bug in this house that's okay, and it's my bugs. So we're going to go ahead and Ash the Max C, because we just really don't want them drawing about 2 or 3 cards off of this. And they have another Imperm. So Parallel Exceed is going to get negated. It does get bigger stats for this, but it does just mean that I can't really do anything. But they did activate a trap with Sarah on board. And yeah, 2 Imperms, Ash and Max C in their opener. No wonder they just passed their turn. So they have pretty thoroughly shut down anything that I can do, so I'm like, alright, Imperm, and I'm just going to go attack him with Sarah, because I was going to use Exceed to extend and try to get Rafflesia out or Penguicula, but that is not happening. With that, my opponent is going to set a card and pass, because they're pretty much out of gas. But here, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to try to use Marmelio here. They're going to Super Poly with Invocation. So this is some sort of Alistair deck, which is kind of rare to see on the ladder, outside of what I play it. Our opponent is going to fuse Sarah and Marmelio into Moodragon, which it's a bit late for Super Poly, because Marmelio is going to get me into Holtea, which will get me back into Sarah, which can get me back into this game. But here's one thing my opponent forgot. Even though they did Super Poly, it pretty much shut down my offense and make me have to use even more resources. They did negate Parallel Exceed, which did negate its ability to lose half of its stats. So yeah, now I just have a 2000 beater, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna attack with Parallel Exceed. I got no reason not to. I'm gonna set both of my traps, and the main reason I'm doing this, I could have used Holtea immediately, but I really don't know what this Invoker deck can do, so I really want to have as much control as possible, because I have Parallel Exceed, which is a great way of just beating down my opponent. So from here, I'm just going to use Holtea. The main reason I do this is because there's no reason to really not. I'm going to go ahead and link off the Holtea here, back into Sarah, which I know looks weird because this technically has less stats. But the main reason you do this is because you can use Holtea's effect from the grave to special summon a monster, which is one really good thing, but also just it gives us Sarah, and Sarah is the most important card to have on the board for us. And from there, my opponent's like, nah, you got it. Alright, we're going into this game with our opponent going first, which is kind of rough for us. Traptrix really want to go first in order to set up their board, but it's fine. My opponent is going to set 2 cards and pass, which is pretty terrifying. They could be Lab, which is a very rough matchup for us, because Lab is generally just an upgraded version of our deck. They're just a better trap deck, and they can do a lot more than us, but we can go the distance if we need to. So we're going to start with Mantis. My opponent is going to Max C. So in order to try to give them as few cards as possible, I'm like, alright, I'm going to use Arachnocampa now. It's the best thing I can do here, just try to get my special summon. My opponent Gravedigger Trap holes me, making me think that this is the mirror, and I'm like, oh, my opponent gets their Max C off, but it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and grab Marmelio from the deck thanks to Mantis, because I would grab Arachnocampa, but it's already in hand. So my game plan here is like, alright, I'm going to play the Garden. It's going to let me get Marmelio out, which is going to let me dig a little bit deeper into my deck. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set my 3 traps and just attack into them, because I do not want them to have more cards from Maxi, and with my traps, maybe I can set up Sarah next turn. So we're gonna go ahead and use the Traptrix Garden, play Mermelio, grab Holtea, which allows us to extend a little bit more. My opponent's just like, nah, you got it. We'll never know what they were playing. Going into our next game, we are back to going first, which is exactly where we want to be with the Traptrix deck. I've got an interesting hand, to say the least. We're going to go ahead and normal Arachnicampa here into Sarah, which is going to get us into Parallel Exceed, which allows us to do some nonsense. From here, we're going to fast forward a little bit, because you've seen what the deck can do from here. We're pretty much just going to go into Rafflesia and pass. Now, I'm going to keep the evenly matched in hand, because if my board does get cleared, I can use this to clear their board back. They do Kashtira Unicorn me, and I'm like, oh. Kashtira likes to not have monsters on board, so I'm going to go ahead and just Floodgate Trap Hole this so they don't get access to their effects, and also they can't summon like a Fenrir or something. From here, I'm going to go ahead and grab Mantis with Sarah. My opponent to go into Triple Tactics, and I don't know if they just like selected the wrong card. Maybe they thought they could target my stuff, but Rafflesia does give us protection, so they'd have to grab Rafflesia, and with this, my opponent's like, okay, I hate Traptrix. Alright, this is going to be our last game for a little bit of a session here with Traptrix. We are going second, which is kind of rough. My opponent is going to set to and pass. This is a bit of a pattern with this deck when we have to go second, is we play some sort of trap deck on the other end, which makes me a little bit nervous. Again, this could be a lab, which is a rough matchup for us. It's okay though. I'm gonna go ahead and just use Harpy's Feather Duster, because I'm like, look, I don't know what your traps are, I just don't want to deal with them. So bye-bye. And it turns out we're playing Eldritch. Now, I'm pretty familiar with the lab matchup. I've lost quite a bit of games against lab with Traptrix, but I don't know how well we do into Eldritch. So let's see if we can actually beat the other trap deck. We're using Mermelio to go to Holtea, because that's just kind of what you typically do. From there, we're going to summon Sarah. And with Sarah, we're going to go ahead and set Holtea. We're going to use Holtea's effect to discard the Trap Hole Nightmare, which is a good card in this matchup, but our opponent really cares about having Eldritch in the graveyard, so they can special summon it and make it, give it a little bit of protection and just make it a bigger threat. So I'm going to go ahead and just pitch this for Holtea, which allows me to access Sarah, which is going to give me Mantis. I do not get the special summon with Mantis, but it's fine in this situation. We're going to go into Pingwickla. I spent a little bit of time in the tank on this, because I was like, do I want Raff or do I want Ping? Well, Ping is naturally just as big as Eldritch, and if I can somehow play Ping, I can go from Ping, I can steal Eldritch from their graveyard onto Ping. So we're going to go use Ping's effect, activate her effect, which is going to activate Sarah's effect, which allows us to get Graveyard Digger's Trap Hole, which is a great trap in this matchup. I'm going to summon Arachnicampa, and from here I'm just going to start swinging into my opponent. I cannot get into Rafflesia, which is a bit rough, especially because Eldritch is a very good deck, and Rafflesia is one of our ways of grinding out our opponent as fast as possible, but it's fine. Grave Digger's Trap Hole, Ash Blossom, and Effect Veiler is a pretty powerful set of control pieces. So my opponent's going to activate both of their traps to go ahead and grab the Eld Elixir and the Eld Elixir of the Scarlet Sanguine, which is going to try to set them up to try to get their attrition game going with Eldritch. My opponent is going to Eld Elixir of White Destiny here, and I'm like, okay. So they're going to try to special summon an Eldritch monster. What I need to do here is I need to activate Holtea from the graveyard. The main reason I want to do this is because I want Mermelio from my graveyard. In response to this, they're going to go ahead and activate the Eld Elixir. I'm going to go ahead and Ash this, because I do not want them getting deeper into their deck for another Eldritch, because 1 is already hard enough for us to deal with, 2 is basically impossible for us to deal with. From here, I'm going to summon the Mermelio from the graveyard with Holtea's. In fact, this is going to allow them to special summon an Eldritch from their deck using this. I'm going to use Mermelio's effect to pop their back row, which is also going to allow us to activate Sarah, because we did activate a trap for the graveyard, which is going to give us Pudica, and Pudica is going to go ahead and banish Eldritch. And we're going to chain block this with Sarah's effect, so they can't really negate this. We're going to go ahead and get the other Holtea, so I can extend a little bit more. We're going to banish Eldritch, so basically we just stop them from doing their Eldritch nonsense. And because a card was sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, which was Pudica, I can just scoop up Eldritch right onto Pingwickalo, which is going to stop their strategy immensely. They're going to go ahead and try to set this Guardian trap, which isn't a great trap, but whatever. My opponent is going to try to Monster Reborn. They cannot get Eldritch because it's currently under my Pingwickalo, so they can only grab Ash Blossom. I'm assuming they're doing this to try to defend themselves the very little that they can. Pudica is going to activate, but because we have Eldritch underneath Ping, they can't grab anything back. Because if you don't know, Pudica allows you to banish a card basically for 1 turn, but it's currently underneath Ping. So I'm going to go ahead and use my materials. I'm going to get rid of one of my monsters off of Ping, not the Eldritch, because I do not know what if they can do anything nonsensical with that. They're going to go ahead and use the Scarlet Sanguine and the Guardian to try to defend themselves as much as possible. And I'm like, alright, well, it's time to break my opponent's board, because I don't like this nonsense. I'm going to go ahead and link off all 3 of our effect monsters into one of our big monsters in the deck, Adipus. Adipus is a very, very powerful monster. It gives all of our Traptrix more attack, and as long as we have normal trap in the graveyard, it's unaffected by all trap effects, and we can target face-up monsters, face-up cards, my mistake, our opponents control up to the number of insects and plants we control, which in this position is 3, negate their effects, and if we have any traps in the graveyard, we can banish a trap but destroy one of the cards we negated. So we're going to go ahead and negate both of these cards. The main reason I want to do this is because I want to destroy Ash Blossom. And a fun fact that I discovered in this game, if you negate a trap monster while it's on the board as a monster, it will go back into the spell and trap zone as a trap. So using Adipus, I basically cleared 2 monsters off of their board instead of just 1. I'm gonna go ahead, destroy their other spell and trap, and from here my opponent's just like, yeah, you have enough damage to kill me, this game is over. And that is how Traptrix beats Eldritch, going second. Let's get into that. And with that session out of the way, it appears as though some of our opponents have been able to escape the Traptrix territory and put an end to the nightmare. At least for now. Okay, but seriously, I did have a lot of fun with the Traptrix deck. I always love coming back to this deck and just trying to do what I can to shut down my opponent's nonsense. I do still really, really like this deck. I like the fact that there is a deck that can go the distance, that uses trap holes, some of my favorite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! I will say that I don't think Traptrix is a meta contender much. It's definitely more of a rogue deck, mostly because Labyrinth does what Traptrix does, but just better, and it's just better at the control and grind game than this deck. But also, Traptrix into like Horus is not a great matchup, even though we naturally carry Gravedigger's Trap Hole, and Traptrix into Snake Eyes is just non-existent, because Snake Eyes can extend through literally the stars above if they want to, but that's neither here or there. I still really like this deck, and the main reason I don't feature it too much is because, as you saw, a lot of games with this deck aren't really quote-unquote content-friendly. They don't go very long, because once you break your opponent's spirits with just a little bit of control, they kind of just give up and don't want to play anymore. Which is fine, I can play this deck in my spare time and enjoy it, and even then, maybe we can come back if we find a little bit more interesting tech. I didn't get to use Malevolent Sin or Little Knight in any of our games this time, but hey, because I have these cards and I didn't get a chance to use them now, it gives me an excuse to revisit the deck later, which I definitely plan on doing. So, thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed these kind of sillier games of Traptrix on a less serious note. I know I did. I've been the Ghost with Knife. Thank you for tuning in, folks. Now, get the hell out of here.